Are Donald Trump's daily appearances at White House press briefings on his administration's response to this pandemic helping or hurting? Let's talk with someone who's attended some of those briefings. He's Bill Press, progressive political commentator, host of the podcast, The Bill Press Pod, and he's in our nation's capital. Bill Press, I know you're not his biggest fan, but an Ipsos ABC News poll showed that 55% of those surveyed approve of how the president is handling this crisis. Are you surprised at that?
Not really surprised, Larry. I think, first of all, that's a factor of the fact that Donald Trump is on national television every day giving a briefing from the briefing room with the Surgeon General and the Vice President and the head of FEMA and whoever else he brings together that day. And I think that has an overall impression on people that this is a guy in charge, it's a serious crisis, and this is a guy in charge. I do believe, however, that as things go on, and things are definitely going to get worse, that people may start to question, is all this just talk, or is the guy really in charge, and is he really getting things done?
Do you consider him a wartime president?
By definition, we're at war against this virus, yes, and he is a wartime president. But here's what I find lacking, and I'm not trying to make this political at all, Larry, but you and I know over the years, at a time of any serious crisis, we all, the American people, look to the president for leadership. You and I remember Ronald Reagan when the Challenger disaster, Bill Clinton, Oklahoma City, George W. for September 11th, Barack Obama, Mother Emanuel down in Charlotte, and Sandy Hook up in Connecticut. And so people are naturally looking to the White House right now for Donald Trump for leadership. And I fear that what they see for the most part is confusion and an inadequate response. I mean, we lost 2 months when Donald Trump was in total denial about how serious this crisis was. We knew about it in early January. It wasn't until last week that he announced an emergency declaration and said, we got to take this seriously.
Yeah, Fox News trailed right behind, acting like it was a hoax. All right, according to Bill de Blasio, the mayor of New York, the president won't... I'm sorry, go ahead.
Well, Fox News, I think, has a lot to answer for. Ben Smith in the New York Times a couple of days ago laid that out, that it's not just that some of the talk show hosts, like particularly Sean Hannity and Laura Ingraham, were calling this a hoax, saying that the Democrats were responsible for it, that what the Democrats were saying was more dangerous than any virus, and basically just dismissing the whole thing, which of course Donald Trump was doing too, that nobody called up, the new Lachlan Murdoch, who's the new head of Fox News. Nobody called these people, these hosts up and said, hey, this is a public health problem. Put politics aside and just talk about, you got to take this seriously. I think we're all grateful. Tucker Carlson, our old friend from CNN, Tucker Carlson was the one who was saying, this is serious, guys. You got to stop just making fun of it. And he went down to Mar-a-Lago so he could talk to Trump and pulled Trump aside and talked him into changing his tune on this. I mean, Tucker Carlson might have ended up saving a lot of lives because Trump listened to him. Thank God.
The mayor of New York, Bill de Blasio, said that the president won't lift a finger to help his hometown. And he said if the president doesn't act, people will die who could have lived otherwise. What do you make of de Blasio's criticism?
Well, I think that's a little too strong, frankly. You know, the 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 president has been talking with the governors. He has particularly been talking with Andrew Cuomo, and New York is one of the hot spots. You know, it's California, it's New York, it's Illinois. That's where most of the cases have. I'm sorry, Washington State and New York and California. That's where most of the cases have been. Now, New York leads in the number of cases that have been tested and people found positive. But the president has sent this medical ship up there. He has sent the first CDC medicines to New York to be tested. So I don't think he's ignored New York. But overall, I think we have seen in this country the leadership has been coming from the governors and the mayors. I mentioned in New York, Gavin Newsom from California, our own governor in California, Jay Inslee up in Washington State, Gretchen Whitmer out in Michigan. These are the governors who have been really taking the most serious and the most forward steps. Gina Raimondo from Rhode Island as well. You could go down the list. And I was in the briefing room the other day, Larry, when somebody asked the president if he was going to buy some masks and buy some testing kits, have the federal government do that and send them to the states. And the president said, no, that's up to the governors. He said, I'm no shipping clerk. Basically, he's let them take the lead, and I think they've done a pretty good job, or doing a pretty good job.
Bill, I saw you at the White House with the press crew ask a question over the weekend. What's your impression, and having been there, what's your impression as to how the president is handling this and what that daily briefing is like?
Well, Larry, it's rather bizarre, I have to tell you. First of all, you understand there has not been a White House briefing by the press secretary since March 11, 2019, over a year. And now suddenly the briefings have come back, and the vice president is in charge of the task force. So they announce the briefings every day. This is going to be a briefing led by the vice president on the latest in the fight against the coronavirus. And yet every day it's the president and takes the podium and gives his own introduction and his own spiel, a lot of it just kind of rambling first. And then he introduces other people and then they ask questions. The problem is there's a lot of talk, but a lot of it doesn't add up. I mean, the president keeps talking about the fact we're working on a vaccine, and so keep hope alive. But the vaccine, the health officials tell us, won't be ready for at least a year. Then the president says, we've got these new medications that are being used for rheumatism now. We think that'll work on coronavirus. This could be a game changer. And then Dr. Fauci steps up to the podium right after the president and says, slow down. These things are not tested. We got to start some tests, and it'll be months before we know whether they work. And then the president says, talking to these companies, and they're going to turn around and they're going to make ventilators starting today. And then the reporters call the same companies after the news conference, and the companies say, we don't know anything about this, or it'll take us months to recalibrate. So I just have to say, there's a skepticism among the press corps that what we're hearing from the podium every day, and I've been to 4 or 5 of these briefings, is not necessarily, well, put it this way, there's a big difference between what we hear in the briefings from people on the ground in these states and what we hear from the governors.
Do you think that Joe Biden should be more visible?
I definitely think Joe Biden should be more visible. I think first of all, I think we need leadership from both sides on this issue, number one. Number two, I think there's a big contrast between what Donald Trump failed to do and what Joe Biden said he would have done had he been president. Now, he can't go out there and hold big rallies, But there's no reason, if Donald Trump can hold, Joe Biden can hold a news conference. If Donald Trump can come out every day in front of the press corps in Washington, then Joe Biden, who's just up the road in Wilmington, he could come up, maybe not every day, but he could certainly come forward and say, here's what I would do, here's what we need to do, here's what I propose. I think Joe Biden is missing an opportunity by staying huddled up in Wilmington, Delaware.
Do you fear the election could be postponed for a while?
You know, there's a lot of talk in Washington about that Donald Trump might postpone the election. I think that's all BS. I'd like to use a real word, but I don't know. I'm not worried about that. First of all, I mean, we're in deep trouble if this thing is not behind us by November, number one. And number two, my understanding is that constitutionally, the president cannot delay the election even if he wanted to. So I think people ought to just relax on that front, cool their jets on that front. Somehow we'll get through the rest of the Democratic primaries. Maybe everybody will vote by mail. And then there may or may not be conventions. That's a different thing because that's in July. But I think by November, we'll have an election. Everybody will vote. And may the best person win.
Are you optimistic or pessimistic about all of this, Bill?
I prefer to think that I'm realistic, meaning I think the reality is that things are going to get worse. And I'll tell you why I say that. My son, one of our sons, is a medical director of a clinic up in Bend, Oregon. I talk to him every day about this. He tells me they don't know how many people have this virus in Bend, Oregon, because they don't have enough tests and they can't do enough testing. And that's true across the country. So today it's like 35,000 people in the United States reported cases, 35,418 left. That's just a fraction of the people that have this virus. We do not know because we haven't done the testing. So realistically, this is going to get better. But in the long run, I'm optimistic that we'll put this behind us, just like China put it behind us. So is South Korea. So is Singapore. We'll get over this and we'll bounce back like we always have.
Bill, I thank you very much for joining us under trying circumstances. Always great having you with us.
All right, Larry, always good to join you.